A skin boat is already taking on water in the black swell, and a child is being shoved forward as the shoreline vanishes behind them. They have no map, no compass, and no written words. Yet they're about to cross open ocean and land on a continent that has never seen humans. And the proof will be a single obsidian microblade, a tiny volcanic glass knife, found on the far shore thousands of miles from the nearest volcano. How do you navigate into emptiness with nothing but sky and waves? And what happens if you miss by just one night? Because the most dangerous part isn't the storm you can see. It's the invisible highway in the water that only exists for a few weeks a year, and it can carry you to safety or erase you. 48 hours earlier, the sea looks calm enough to lie. A small band is packing what you can carry when you're walking away from a known world. Fire in a clay-lined bundle, sinew cord, a few stone points, and a rolled hide to patch seams. There's no ceremony because ceremony costs time, and time is the thing they don't have. The ocean edge is a trap and a lifeline at the same time. You can follow a coast like a line drawn by a god, but coasts break. They splinter into cliffs, fjords, and dead ends where the land simply stops and the water begins. So here's the central contradiction. Ancient humans crossed the world without maps, by treating the world itself like a map. And the first marker isn't a mountain or a river, it's a sound. They stand where the surf is loudest and listen for the pitch that tells you the tide is turning. Not poetry, physics. When the tide flips, the current flips. Miss that flip, and you don't just paddle harder. You lose an entire day, and a day is the difference between landing on a beach and landing on nothing. If you had to choose, right now, would you launch at sunrise like your instincts scream, or at night when you can't see the waves? They wait for darkness. That choice is our first clue. Because they are not trying to see where they're going. They're trying to feel a moving river that runs through the ocean. And that's the mechanism we're chasing. Without a map, what do you follow? Here's the second hook, the bigger loop. The same trick that lets a boat find land also let people cross ice, deserts, and mountains. Not by knowing the whole route, but by chaining small certainties so tightly that the unknown never has room to swallow you. We're going to build that chain and then snap it at the worst possible moment. Now, pattern interrupt. The best map in the ancient world wasn't on land. It was in your mouth. Salt. On a coastline, your tongue can tell you if the wind is coming off open water or off land. It sounds ridiculous until you realize what's at stake. If the wind shifts wrong, your return is gone. A headwind makes a skin boat a coffin, so they do what migrating humans did again and again. They don't commit until the world commits first. Mini payoff number 1. Ancient navigation starts with constraints, not confidence. They set a ticking clock, not an hourglass, a moon. The launch window is tied to a spring tide when the current runs hardest along the coast. That's the invisible highway, and it only lines up cleanly for a short stretch of days. If they're late, the highway breaks. They push off. The boat is low and narrow, ribs of wood, skin stretched tight, seams sealed with fat and ash. Every paddle stroke is a decision you can't take back. Behind them, the beach shrinks. Ahead, there's only dark. So what are they steering toward? Not west, not north, something older than direction, a seam. Along some coasts, cold water and warm water meet like two armies, and the boundary foams. On that seam, different birds gather, different fish break the surface, different kelp drifts in long rafts. If you can find the seam, you can follow it like a road that no one built, a road that moves, a coastline that lies, a boat with no map, following a foaming seam where warm and cold oceans collide. But even that isn't enough to cross open water, because a seam can lead you along land or lead you past the last point you can ever return from. So they add the second link in the chain, stones. Not big stones, not monuments, pebbles. They pick up a particular kind, rounded, pale, with a texture that feels like dry bone. On their home shore, those pebbles exist. On the far shore, if it's the wrong island or the wrong coast, they won't. It's a crude test, but it's a test you can do with numb fingers at midnight. Ancient humans didn't need a map that showed everything. They needed a way to know instantly whether they were still inside the world they understood. And now we widen the lens, because the ocean crossing is the most dramatic. But it's not the first time this species solved the no maps problem. Rewind further. Picture a human group facing a wall of white, ice stretching to the horizon, wind carving it into ridges like frozen waves. There are no signposts, but there's something better than a signpost: an edge. On ice, the difference between safe and lethal is often only a few steps, because snow hides crevasses. So you don't travel across, you travel along pressure ridges where the ice has buckled, visible from far away, along the line where sea ice meets open water, where seals must breathe, along driftwood, because driftwood means a current, and a current means a predictable direction. Mini payoff number 2, mapeless travel is edge hunting. Now switch environments, because deserts should be impossible. In a desert, the horizon is a prank. Dunes move, landmarks die. So what's the edge? It's not a line, it's a smell. After a rare rain, desert plants release a sharp green scent you can track on the wind. Animals track it first. Humans learn to read the animals. Birds that fly low at dawn, not high. They're commuting between water and roost. Ant trails that converge, not random, but pulled toward moisture. Short's moment 2, 8 to 12 seconds. In a desert with no landmarks, the map is a smell after rain, and the birds that commute to water every dawn. And mountains? Mountains are the cruelest because they look like they should be simple. Just go over. But over kills you. So ancient routes snake through saddles, low points between peaks, because weather funnels there in predictable ways. You read snow lines like contour lines. You move at specific times because the mountain changes by the hour. Frozen in the morning, rockfall at noon, ice again at night. Mini payoff number 3. Without maps, time becomes a coordinate. Back to our ocean band. They're paddling in darkness, and the coastline is now a memory. The air is colder. That could mean weather, or it could mean they've crossed that seam and entered a current. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Once you're in a strong current, paddling is no longer steering. It's trimming. You can only adjust the angle of your fate. So how did they keep the angle right? They used the sky, but not the way you're picturing. Not find the North Star. Not a compass point. They used star paths. A particular bright star rises from the horizon in a specific place, then climbs, then sets. If you keep it on a certain shoulder, you're not following a direction. You're following a motion. And motions are harder to mistake than angles. They didn't navigate by north. They navigated by a star's path, keeping its motion pinned to one shoulder like a living needle. But even the sky lies. Clouds arrive without warning. The star disappears. And this is where the master open loop tightens. How do you cross the world without maps when your last guide goes out? The answer is almost here, because they switch from the sky to something no cloud can hide: sound. In deep water, waves are long, and they come from the dominant wind. Near land, waves bounce back. They interfere. The rhythm gets messy. So experienced paddlers feel the change through the boat's ribs. Smooth lift, lift, lift becomes a jittery slap. That slapping is land echoing your own ocean back at you. If you can read that slap, you can find land before you see it. Now the clock becomes brutal. Their fire bundle is cooling. If they land without fire, they might not survive the night, even if they reach shore. Wet hides, wet hands, cold wind, hypothermia doesn't care that you made history. So they gamble on one last link in their chain: kelp. Floating kelp isn't just plants. Kelp forests need rock to anchor to, and rock usually means a coastline or a shallow shelf. Follow thickening kelp, and you're following the shape of land that's still below the surface. Mini payoff number 4. They mapped what they couldn't see by reading what the sea carried. And then the midpoint reversal. They find kelp. Lots of it, which should mean land. But the water is getting deeper. That's impossible. So what's happening? They've hit a kelp raft torn free by a storm, a drifting false coast. The map is now actively lying. If they follow it, they could be carried in a circle until exhaustion makes the decision for them. So what would you do with no stars, no landmarks, and a current you can't fight? They stop chasing signs and start testing them. They take one of those pale pebbles they brought and drop it overboard. If the water is shallow, you can sometimes hear it click rock. Nothing. They drop another, still nothing. Deep water. The kelp is a trap. So they pivot away from the raft even though it's the only land-like thing they've had for hours. They're choosing emptiness over a comforting lie. Silence means keep going. Now the climax begins to form because the current, the invisible highway, is finally doing its job. The boat's lift changes. Not chaotic now, synchronized. They're being carried. The danger shifts from getting lost to arriving wrong. Because land isn't always a beach. Land can be cliffs. Land can be surf that flips a boat in seconds. And if they arrive at the wrong kind of shore, they won't get a second attempt. They listen for a new sound. Not echoing wave slap, but the low, continuous roar of breakers on a long shoreline. A point makes different noise than a bay. A bay gives you irregular bursts. A long beach is a steady engine. They need a bay. The child in the boat isn't just a passenger. In small craft, weight distribution matters. If the bow lifts too high, the wind grabs it. If the bow digs, the next wave can pour in. Every person is ballast. And now at the worst possible time, the wind shifts. Cold on the ear, offshore.